All right, thank you everyone for taking a moment today to learning a little bit about PolicyMap. It is a bit of an overview, so what I'll try to do actually today is show you just the overall tool, kind of splash you with some of the different features and things you can do within PolicyMap, and hopefully that'll give you some ideas about how you could use the tool in lessons or in courses. We'll go through a little bit of data, we'll go through some features, and as I mentioned to Chris, we're going to record this so that way if you do need to come back and want to come back to some of these things that we talk about, you can definitely rewatch the session. And I will follow up with a more general email to give some really unique links to the support pages that we have for the features that are in PolicyMap, but also we had a couple of webinars previously from other professors, one from the University of Delaware and one from Seton Hall, that presented how they use PolicyMap in some of their work. So you can kind of see how other professors are using it as well. Great. And my name is Phil Vu, and we'll show you some PolicyMap today. Thank you so much. So if you haven't seen the tool, it is a web-based tool. Let me give you a little bit of info who we are so you understand where the tool and PolicyMap comes from. We are part of a larger organization that is a nonprofit in the greater Philadelphia Mid-Atlantic region. We are what is called a CDFI, which is a Community Development Financial Institution. And all that means is that we're just a community bank with a very specific mission, and that mission is to help revitalize low and moderate income communities through very unique programs, things like affordable housing, charter schools, grocery stores, and even health centers. And we've always used data in a spatial way, looking at it across a neighborhood to understand where we want to invest in, but then also at the same time see the impact of those investments. And that's really the genesis of PolicyMap. That's really what we wanted to build for users to do, and that's what we have in today. So we are a web-based tool. We have one of the largest libraries of data, hopefully that's online, that's interactive, and we'll cover today some of the different ways you can interact with that data itself. The first thing you need to know is that it is a site license, meaning that you need to either be on the network or proxied in onto the network to access the interface itself. Once you're here, you can actually use the tool directly. There's no need to make an account if you wanted to. This is what we would call the public use of it, meaning that what you create here is shared with everyone. But at any time, you can just make an account up here, and then that way it'll give you your own login within the public site license for the university, and it helps you kind of cordon off your section of work and things you create. But you also have features that allows you to share that with the public side of the university license. Let me log myself in here. So once you log in, you have your own separate account. And again, what you create here is separate from what you're going to share or create within the public side of the universities. On the top left are a variety of different ways to interact with all the data that's in PolicyMap. And so what we'll do is we'll go through in a very broad sense some of these features that you're going to see, so that way you have a general sense of how things work in PolicyMap. The Maps page, its goal is to visualize data. So the Maps itself allows you to pan and zoom around. If you use the zoom bar on the right, if you have a scroll wheel on the mouse, it'll scroll that way as well. So pretty basic stuff when it comes to an online map. You can use the location bar in the top though to zoom the map to the place that you're working in. So you can either zoom by an address, and it will drop a pin on that location, give you a little info bubble. At the same time, you can pan around now to different parts of the neighborhoods or zoom in and out to get a broader and closer picture. The location bar, though, also is a bit of a search bar, but in this case, it's a search bar for geography, meaning that if you don't have an address, you can search for things like counties and cities and zip codes and so forth. And instead of dropping a pin, when you search for geography, it will actually draw the boundary for that geography. So one of the really unique features of the PolicyMap tool itself is that if you zoom into an area or even at the national level, and you click onto the map at any time, what this will do is actually draw the smallest geography that's in our universe, which is a block group. And then it'll also show you all the different geographies that that point that you clicked sits in. So in this case, this point sits within this block group with its sits within the tract, zip code, school district, county, and city, and so forth. If you're not familiar with some of these geographies, most of them are just census geographies, and so I'll give you a really kind of easy explanation of them. But this is a really neat window into the building blocks that is used by the census as well as PolicyMap to show data from a small geography and how it aggregates up to these larger national-sized geographies. So again, we used a block group as our smallest geography for data aggregation, and a block group is a census boundary which contains about 400 to 1,500 people. Census that we do every 10 years and every year, the census publishes that data at these very specific geographies that the census uses. The smallest geography in here is what is called a block group, which again contains about 400 to 1,500 people. And then that's kind of the starting building blocks of geographies. A grouping of block groups build to form a census tract, which is sometimes similar to a neighborhood that you would think about. But then from there, census tracts build these really unique boundaries like what are called ZICTAs or zip code tabulation areas, but they also build things like counties and cities and metros and such as you go up higher and higher. So that's kind of just an insight to the geographies that the census uses, but it's also an insight of the different aggregations you'll be able to find within PolicyMap. So let me go over to an area. What's a zip code I can zoom into over near you guys? You might be familiar with the area a bit. You got it. All right. Always see some unique boundaries. So once you get to these areas, again, if you click onto it, you'll see that this is the block group that that area sits in. So the university itself actually sits within one block group. And then from there, the zip code is actually smaller than the census tract. Oh. You can actually click onto these links and it will zoom back out and then it'll actually draw it. So, so your block group and your zip code is the same size. You can also overlay some of these boundaries that are seen on the map, and that's on the bottom here, which is map boundaries. So this menu will show you a list of all the different geographies that you can search for in the very top, but now instead of searching for them, you can display them on the map at the same time. So now you show a map of census tracts on here. You can also show, as you can see, some of the more complex and unique boundaries, legislative districts, school districts, and such. And then by default, as we're still in boundaries, there are two default layers that our system displays, which is road and land use. So you can remove that and it'll give you a sometimes cleaner map to work with. As you can see, land use also includes areas that have been designated for education or universities. So that's what happens when we took that off. Oops. And then finally, you can also make your own boundaries. So everything that we've kind of talked about so far are what we call predefined geographies, meaning that they're just boundaries that are in our universe. But we definitely know that users using a mapping tool like or tend to draw their own custom boundaries. And so we call them custom regions in PolicyMap, and you can access them via here, either by clicking onto that, and that'll give you a list of any ones that you've created previously, and then the option to create any new ones you want. So there are three unique ways to create a custom region in PolicyMap. The first is the draw feature, and that's a bit of a freehand feature that allows you to draw a boundary based on clicking onto the map. So this example, if you have a boundary, maybe it consists of a handful of roads or landmarks or such, you can use the draw feature to do just that. So what happens now is that your mouse turns into a pointer, and you're simply just dropping the vertices of a target area. You can zoom in to get closer to the map. You can pan to get to a different area. I'll draw a more complex one as usual. But the end goal is, do we want to click onto a point or the first point to close your custom region? And if there you have a chance to give it a custom name, and now your custom region is saved into your menu that you created here. So a drawn custom region is really unique in that it allows you to make a boundary that doesn't conform to any of the boundaries that are in PolicyMap. It doesn't care that you cross city lines, county lines, block groups, and so forth. It will care about those boundaries when you need to aggregate data for it, or if you want to summarize or create a report for it, it'll figure out the best geographies used in the size of your custom region. Use a very simple 50% rule, so that way at least 50% of that area that it's going to use to aggregate has to be contained within your custom region, and then from there it'll sum up all the boundaries that are inside your target area. But if you do have a custom region or a unique boundary that is maybe a containment of a handful of geographies, maybe a grouping of zip codes or counters, or even just smaller geographies like tracts, then you can use the other feature, which is our assemble custom region. So this, as the instructions will tell you, means that you're going to use any of the boundaries that are already in PolicyMap. And so initially it defaults to the boundaries that we're zoomed into, which are census tracts. But we can use this menu in the top right, and this will give us a chance to choose, again, any of the boundaries that are already in PolicyMap. So you can be very granular and use those small geographies that we talked about, block groups, or use some of the larger ones like zip codes and cities and counties. So in the case of an assemble custom region, you're just clicking onto the map. As you can see, it starts highlighting those areas. If you make a mistake, you can deselect areas at the same time. Assemble custom regions are also unique in that you can make a non-contiguous target area, meaning that if you wanted to sum up two boundaries, maybe across the city from each other or even across the state from each other, you can make a non-contiguous custom region in that sense. And again, give it a name. And so now we have a drawn custom region and assemble custom region. And then, of course, the last feature is the radius one, which is somewhat self-explanatory. So I won't get too far into that one. As you can see, custom regions are saved in the menu now. You can add them and remove them from the map at the same time. And then also with custom regions, they have a little bit of intelligence behind them, and as well as the ability to customize them. So the two icons on the edges, the X will remove it from the map, whereas the red icon will give you a handful of functions available, including changing the colors of the boundary, filling it in, and even controlling the transparency, as well as taking this custom region into the other features that we're going to talk about in PolicyMap to either download data for it, get a summarized report for it, or you can even put this custom region, as I mentioned, with either other university users or just put it into the main university site license. That way you can share your boundary with anyone that comes to the main site without login and such. All right, so that's kind of a really good summary about boundaries. Again, the bar on the very top, it's going to zoom the map to the place that you're working in. The map boundaries in the bottom is going to allow you to overlay some of the boundaries that you probably are searching for. And then, of course, the custom region allows you to create, and then also in this case, zoom into previously saved custom regions that are on the tool. All right, let me know if there are any other questions or any questions that you might have about boundaries. We're going to go into data a little bit, and then we'll start talking about other features. All right. So once you have the map situated to a given area, the next step really is the ability to start overlaying data. And that's really kind of the goal of using a tool like PolicyMap. And all that data is available in these categories on the top of the map. Each category, what we try our best to do is summarize data that makes sense within that category. So economy will have jobs data, education will have everything from enrollment to proficiency scores to actual schools themselves, and health and so forth. So I'll summarize a couple of these just to give you a sense of what you'll find in there. But the one distinction you'll see in PolicyMap categories is that there's two types of data that you can use within the tool, and they're really just broken up by the columns that you see here. So columns 1 and 2 are what we call a data layer. And all that means is that the data, I'm going to remove this parts layer. All that means is the data is aggregated to those geographies that we talked about in the very beginning. block groups, tracts, zip codes, and so forth. There's no point or address level data set for a data layer. And then you have a legend for it. We'll talk about the legend, but just understand that data layers is aggregate data or summarized data. And that's columns 1 and 2. And you'll see some of these kind of cascading menus that occur, but you're technically still in column 2, but it's like a shopping cart. If you're on Target or Amazon, it's a cascading menu over. Whereas column 3 is what we call point data sets. And these are icons, which do represent an address. This is not aggregate data in this example. And then you see that there's a legend for points and a legend for layers at the same time, as well as the ability to see points and layers on the map at the same time. So that's the 2 different types of data, and they can also appear on the map together as well. So again, I'll give a brief summary of some of the categories we have and hopefully point out some really unique data sets that you might see within PolicyMap, the tool. So under demographics, you'll see some very basic information. These are probably more familiar census variables, things like population, racial characteristics, ethnicity, age groups. But then we get into some really unique ones from the census, things like veterans data. They started asking some really great questions in the ACS, which allowed the census to break out some very unique and detailed information about veterans. Language spoken at home. If you've seen one of our blogs, we have this fantastic map that shows a variety of different colors, which actually represents the different types of languages that are spoken after English and Spanish. So if you click onto the map, you'll actually get the value for that geography, which is a tract, and then you'll see, again, remember the aggregations that we talked about. So whereas this particular tract, let's see, is Thai, the county itself actually speaks Chinese. County subdivision, which is San Fernando Valley, is Armenian as its 3rd most popular language. So demographics has some really unique variables in here as well, besides language. One of the other really unique ones in PolicyMap is one that we created using the census data as a whole. So if you're familiar with the race data from the census, it's usually shown at one type of race. You can either see the number or percentage of people that are white, Black, Asian, African American, and so forth. And what we wanted to do is make that same map, but put them all together to give users a chance to see where the different races might be more predominant versus others. And so you have this really great map. You probably know your area much better than I do. But in this sense, it's telling you that anything in the red is Hispanic, green is white, and then the purple is Asian, and the blue is Black. So one of the really neat things you see with the maps like this for us was that the darker the color, what it represents is areas that have over 90% of the race in this particular tract is Hispanic. But if you get to the lighter colors in between, what you'll get is, while Hispanic is the predominant race in the area, it actually does not represent the majority of all races within that area itself. So this is a really neat map if you know your neighborhoods, and you definitely start understanding some of the color distinctions that occur here as well. If you ever wanted to see political boundaries on top of this, it's always an amazing map to look at. So I'll give you a really neat example. These 2 very large pockets of Hispanic population for some reason coincide between one congressional district, which runs along here. So Luis Gutierrez, his district is a combination of these 2 very heavily populated Hispanic districts with this very thin line, which is actually just a highway at the very end here, that connects them together. It was a really good news article that talked about some boundaries that occur. So that is in demographics. And again, there's some really unique ones as well to play with. Other variables within demographics are just general ones. Again, things like household types. We do break out household types by some really neat head of households. So grandparents and grandparents as head of households is one of the studies that we do in-house. So we added this layer for users to look at as well. Family types, we have election data. It is at the county level, so it's not the voting precinct, but it does have every election cycle that's in here. If we jump to income and spending, mainly because there is some very basic variables related to income and spending, things like per capita and family income. Household income is the most commonly used indicator to measure income on the federal agency levels. So that is all households. And because it's the most popular, the census ends up breaking out in very specific ways to look at income. So head of household, tenure, the brackets for each individual income groups by age, and then aggregate incomes as well. There's poverty information, there's inequality index, which is a really cool data set that we found. And then the tax data is from the IRS. So this is all the 1040s that we complete every year. These are individual taxes. And with this data, it is only personal taxes, so there's no company or corporate tax. But the IRS publishes that data down to the zip code level, and you have a fantastic way to look at income differences within a given neighborhood, even at the zip code level. And because it is from the IRS and has all of our information, there are many different ways to break out what income looks like in a given area. So not just total income, but things like dividends or IRA contributions, deductions, payments like ETST contributions or programs, or even things like the minimum tax rate, the healthcare individual penalty payments that people have to pay into, and so forth. I take us here because within income and spending, there are some really unique variables on the spending side. Cost burden is a unique one that we use during the subprime lending mode, which is actually turning itself around even more now. But what this shows is that these are households or renters that spend either 30%, which is cost burden, or extreme cost burden is 50% of their household income towards either homeowner costs or renter costs. There's SNAP programs, there's WIC programs, and such. If we jump to quality of life, just to give you a general sense of a bit of a hodgepodge category of data, this has some crime data from the FBI crime report. Just be aware that this is not granular data, unfortunately. This is county and city. It's mainly because the way the FBI reports it or gets it reported upon, they don't have the ability to disseminate the data down further. Other general data sets related to quality of life, including broadband internet access, which is really cool, and how people get to work, heating types, fuel types, food studies. So there are food desert studies or food access studies from the USDA, as well as our own research based on the same concept of food access from the USDA as well. And then as you get into points data sets, you'll see things like grocery retail locations, brownfield Superfund sites, libraries, museums, and such. And then just the last one I'll talk about real quick is the health category. There are some really unique variables related to health in here. So with this, you have health status information. A couple of the data sets that we originally started working with in the health data itself was very limited. At that time, the CDC was the only major source of data that was public or federal. And as health became a much more determinant factors for neighborhoods, more federal agencies started producing different types of health measurements and different types of health studies. And so everything from chronic conditions to cancer information to how people just feel about their health. These are some really unique surveys that were done by various federal health agencies. The census again, So the census again also added questions about health insurance population. And so because of that, it is the census. And so not only can you see the number of people or percentage of people without insurance, but then the breakdown of race, age, income, and even types of jobs and types of insurance. Health status data, it depends on the source, but you'll get down to the census tract level. So in this case, 22% of the adults in the CalState University tract reported as poor health in the last 30 days. Not recently. We'll start talking about the legends a little bit and how to read the years and the geographies. Some other variables in here, you'll see preventive cares, Medicare information, then more general information about risk factors and such. Risk factors is a really unique data set. This is from a program called BRFSIS, which is the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance Survey. And all that means is that the census and, I apologize, I forgot the federal agency, they did a survey of just individuals and asked them very general questions about weight, activities, consumptions, and so forth, and we're able to generate a nationwide report that was an estimate of some of these variables in here. And then, of course, still within health, you can see some more location-based information for health variables, things like hospitals with quality of care gradients, community health centers, alcohol treatment, and substance abuse, and so forth. So it's a lot of data, and what I wanted to show you in these categories up there is just a kind of a sampling of what you can find within the categories themselves. We do hope you go through and do a little bit of exploration and maybe get lost a little bit in some of the data sets that you're going to find. But if you are searching for a certain data and it gets really cumbersome, you can always use the search bar to the left of the location bar. And what this allows you to do is search data by keywords. And so instead of trying to rummage through a category to figure out what keyword, what data would fit within a category, you can just type in a handful of keywords and say, what about opportunity zones? And so in this case, this is a brand new federal program that everyone's kind of participating in based on the new tax bill that was released. And this allows you to get to opportunity zones right off the bat. So the keyword feature is really helpful. It'll get you to maybe data sets that you are more familiar with by just words instead of trying to figure out the categories that we have. But we hope that you do jump into a category. They have a wealth of information to get lost in sometimes, and it does give you a chance to explore some of the different categories that we have. All right, let me do one last thing about the maps page itself. I'm going to walk us through how to customize data and how to export information and data and stuff, and then we should have time to really wrap through some of these other features. Because what you're going to see is what we learned, the reason why we focus all of our time on the maps page is that the interface that you see here, the searching, the data, the boundaries, it actually remains the same through these features. It's just a different way to interact with the data itself. So let me add a really simple layer of data, which is income. And then I'll explain to you how you can customize some of this data and then how to export it, either saving it or the data itself. And then from there, we can keep going on. So this is the median family income. Once you add a data layer, you'll see a couple of really unique things that'll help you read the map a little bit. The title in the very top is just a simple sentence giving you kind of a summary of what you added on. So it's saying this is the median household income. It is from the American Community Survey, which is a 5-year rolling estimate. And so we show the data as 2012 to 2016. If you are not familiar or just want to learn more about a data layer that you add to the map, click onto the title. That'll give you this longer description in here. In this case, this is explaining what makes up households, what the suppression rules were for the ranges that were created. And then furthermore, if you wanted to dig further into the data itself, you can click onto the See Data directory or even the source link in the legend. And this will take you to what we call our data library. And so this page here is a link to every data provider. And it's also a list of every data provider that we use in PolicyMap, giving us the chance to be as transparent as possible about the data that's in there, but also any methodology that we use to calculate the data or even bios that were used to make the boundaries for that particular data set. It should allow someone that's more familiar with maybe a GIS type program to recreate the layers themselves on a GIS type software. So in this case, with the American Community Survey, this is going to tell you all the different topics that we cover, the geographies, the boundaries. Most, if not all, data sets have a link to the main source itself. So again, giving anyone that wants to go past PolicyMap and into the raw data of the source for data. And so this is, again, explaining to you what the ACS is for us, what we pulled into the data, the boundaries that we use when making the files, and any kind of distinct, unique boundaries that we used recently in PolicyMap. So again, that's the C data directory or the census source link. The legend, though, is your tool to be able to read the map itself. There's two main things you want to focus on when you first load a data layer in the legend. The first is the shade by. It's telling you what geography is being shown on the map. And then if you see the year after the geography, in this case, it's saying 2010. I know it's hard to see a little bit. But it's the 2010 next to the census tract designation is actually not the year of the data, it's actually the year of the boundaries. Because again, every 10 years, and then now with the American Community Survey, every year, the census not only updates the data, but they also have to update the boundaries because people move from place to place, which shifts the density of population, and it kind of moves those 1,500 to 5,000 people ranges that occur within different geographies. And so in this case, it's saying that these boundaries that you see here are from the census 2010 biennial census. But again, with the American Community Survey, we plan to have the annual updates for boundaries into PolicyMap. So hopefully by the end of the year, you'll see census tract 2017 and then 2018 once the new ones are coming out at the end. But also in the legend, you'll see the value for the colors itself. So in this case, it's saying now anything in a dark purple is a census tract that has a median household income of 78,000 or more. I know it's hard to see that number. And then on the other side of that spectrum, anything the lighter purple are tracts that have 35,000 or less. You can also at any time click onto the map and it will draw the smallest geography within that we're zoomed into, which is the census tract, give you the value for that tract. So it's in this particular tract here is $23,345 as its median household income, but then it sits within a zip code of 39,000, the county subdivision of 61,000, the metro, the state, and the nation, and so forth. The legend will also give you the ability to customize the layer a little bit, allowing you to change things like the years that are here. So with this, you can go back in time and see what income was in 2000. And so now you see the title changes from estimated income for the last ACS to now just the income in 2010. The range changes from 78,000 in the dark purple to this example is 58,000 in the dark purple. And the value that you click onto the map will show you the values for that particular year that you're in. The variable in PolicyMap is unique as well. The variable is actually how the data itself is being displayed. So in the case of income, the default variable is dollars because you want to see income with dollars. But if I click onto here, you'll see that we have two other variable options, and these are actually percent change calculations for the different years that are available. So instead of having to download different years yourself and do calculations for change, we actually did it ahead of time. So now you can see either a 16-year change in income or a 5-year change in income. And so selecting this, you'll see the title sentence changes again. This is saying now is the percent change in median household income between 2011 and 2016 ACS. The legend values itself changes from dollar amounts to percentages, and now it's saying that anything in a dark purple is a census tract still that has an income increase of 18.95% or more, whereas the dark orange is a decrease of 8.32% or more. So the variable itself is very dynamic based on the source of the data that's being displayed. So most census data has generally about 3 to 5 variables, and it really is everything from number to rate to percentages to percent change calculations. But other more complex sources, health information, might have other variables to choose from, other ways the data can be displayed. So that's the one big takeaway. Take a moment to look at the variables itself. And then just one kind of a really major thing to cover when it comes to using the legend, and that is the ability to control the ranges that are being shown in the map. By default, these ranges are just quintiles or quantiles, depending on the developer that I have. But all that means is that our system takes the total number of geography in that particular data you're looking at. In this case, it's median income by census tract. So it's taking all the tracts that are available in that range and just evenly splitting those tracts into fifths, not caring about the actual values itself. So it does give a good representation of different incomes that occur in that, but a lot of times users using data like income or just using a tool like PolicyMap tend to have very specific ranges that they need to identify. And so we wanted to give users the ability to control those ranges themselves. And that's just a matter of clicking onto the range button, and this will release the fields, allowing you to make your own values. So maybe you want to find places that have really, really low income. We'll bring it down to, let's say, 20,000. But then we'll bring this number to 45, and then we'll bring it up really high. There we go. So with a few edits, we found out there's no tracks within your area that has income below 20,000. I'm sure this is probably the university, which includes students. But with that, you can see now distinctions. Anything in the dark purple are now census tracts that have income above 100,000, and then anything in between that is the 20 to 45,000 range and 45 to 65,000 range as well. So the ability to make your own cut points is really unique because it allows you to really control exactly what the colors on the map would represent for your use. And just understand that the ability to edit ranges is for every variable or any variable that's in the system. So if we put % change on here and we wanted to show places that have either 100% increase in income, 50% increase, and then there may be a 0 and a decrease of 25%. Then the map will show you those very specific and distinct ranges. So now we see these pockets of areas that have income that have dropped more than 20% in a given area, and then within your area, there's no tract that had an increase of more than 100% in its household income. So that's probably one of the really unique features that you can take any variable within PolicyMap and control the ranges and the values that are being shown. Some other minor features in here is that you can control how many ranges that are being shown as well as the colors themselves. All right, so that is a data layer within the tool. As you can see, it has a lot of customization in the legend. That's probably the one thing that I always remind users as a big takeaway is when you add a data layer, just take a moment to look at the legend to make sure that it's set up either by the custom ranges, the variables, even the years, so that way it's showing exactly what you want to be displayed on the map. Let me add a point data set, and then from there we'll show you save, and I think we still have time for some of these other features. If there are any other questions as I go through this, let me know. I'm happy to repeat any parts at the same time. So I'm going to add a really, really simple point data set. Point data sets are probably one of the easiest things to really explain within PolicyMap because they are just points, and the points represent an address, and that's as easy as it can be. But the unique feature is that the legend for points gives you some indications of what's being shown, but the points themselves have a wealth of data available. So these are all public schools that we have here. You can see within the legend, there's a source link for where we pulled this data from. In this case, it's the National Center for Educational Statistics. Again, if you go through this, you can see there's a link to the raw data. If you wanted to download the national data set yourself, I can show you how you can do it within PolicyMap as well. But then also language about what we did for combining some of the different reports that were available to put into these schools themselves. Each school, as you can see, has a wealth of information as you click onto them. So this is an elementary school. Looks like it's within the county, Los Angeles County. It covers K through 5th grade, total number of 585 students, has a 23:1 student-teacher ratio. It's eligible for Title I. This is the enrollment by class. So the kindergarten class is huge, lots of kids in there. And then the breakout of the students themselves, so predominantly Hispanic, and what those numbers look like in percentages. So it's a wealth of information, as you can see, at each school level. And so what we wanted to do is turn some of these fields into ways for you to kind of filter the schools that are being shown or points that are being shown on the map. Because when you load a point data set, you're looking at 100% of the data that's available at the extent that you're looking at. And the filters for us allows you to bring those numbers down to just the grouping that you want to look at. So in the case of public schools, you can filter by the type of schools, the status of the schools, the level that the schools covers, the individual grades. As you keep scrolling through, you'll see how more complete. Yes, you can definitely export graphic some maps and such. As you can see, you can filter by other things. So let's add a really simple filter. Let's say we just want to show middle schools on the map. And so with that, it wipes every other school, the elementary schools, the high schools, and so forth off the map, and just shows middle schools at this time. Filters are neat in that you can combine filters. So that way, if you want to show middle schools and high schools, now you have both on the map at the same time. You can also filter other categories at the same time. So I can say, of these middle schools and high schools that are here on the map, show me the ones that have fewer than 250 students total in those areas. So now these are all three filters at the same time. And finally, you can take one filter and color code them based on the ranges that are available. All of your area has schools that have over 18 or more student-teacher ratios. And then only a handful here are 13 or less. All right, so that's points. And as we remind ourselves, you can add points and layers in the map at the same time. And that will give me a good segue to show you how you can export this map as a graphic visualization that you can use somewhere else. Let me get us on. Trying to find a smaller geography for us to use. I think it's a good one. Okay, so let's say you make this map, and now you want to share this map with other users. There are a couple different ways to export a graphic version of this map, and they're all available within these icons on the top right here. This also allows you to export data as well as share it within other features. The first feature I do want users to really use is the save feature, because this allows you to save this instance of your map in your account, allowing you to come back to it at any time. So that way, maybe a month from now or next year, when you want to reuse these maps for a different class, you can actually save this within your account to access it again later on. One of the really unique features within the save function itself is the ability to make a project. And what the project allows you to do, because we haven't really gone through these other functions, is that it allows you to save anything you create in any of these other functions into one main project. So that way you can make maps and reports and data sets and custom regions and put it into a project for maybe one course and have all the things all the resources available within that project available there. Once you save, again, it saves it within your account. But if you need to take this map offline, then you're going to use the print function in the very top. This actually doesn't print anything. What this allows you to do is export this map as a variety of different objects. So initially, the map itself is interactive, meaning you can click and pan the map around. You can zoom in to get to a very closer level, making sure you get all the parts that you want contained within your map. On the left-hand side is the ability to customize the export a little bit, things like increasing the font if you wanted to, changing the orientation of the map, so that way if your area that you're working in is much more vertical, you have the ability to control that as well. The formats are really simple, just again, how you want to use it. The PDF is probably a much more traditional way to use an image. This allows you to attach it to an email or just print something out directly. Whereas the PNG is a bit of a graphic file, so that way you can copy and paste it into a Word document or a PowerPoint, or still print it out as well and also attach it as an email. You can control the title, so that way if it's for a class, you can add additional information, the student's name and so forth in the top. You can also remove all this information and have just a very clean map to work with. And then when you export, it'll do just that. It'll save, it'll download a copy right onto your desktop. It doesn't save anything, so again, you want to save it into the tool. Other features, as we're still here, include the ability to download this data. So let's say you wanted to download all the schools within your county or within your zip code or even within the nation. You use the download feature on the very top here. Remember how we talked about layers and points? So you can download layer data, so that way you can download all the household income data for a certain geography. So let's say we want to get all the household income for every zip code within California. So to do that, step 2 is you want to choose the area you want to download for. Let's say it's California. And then from there, you get to choose the area, the geography you want to download within the state of California. So the default is the small geography of block group, but we want to use zip codes instead. And then step 3 will explain to you exactly just that. Oh, there's my printout. So you can't see it too well, but this is the printout. You can see the title, description. It is a digital file, so it can be copied and pasted. It can be cropped and made larger and smaller and so forth. As I mentioned with the download, you can download layer data. So initially we wanted to download income, and then from there we wanted to download income for the state of California, but every zip code in California. And so step 3 is just giving you that summary sense, saying that we're going to download household income at the most updated ACS data by zip codes in California. And again, it'll download that file onto your desktop. Same thing with points. I'm going to keep going through this because it'll create my file in a moment. So let's say we want to download all the, here we go. So this is my file. This is every zip code that's in California. If you plan to use this or wanted to use this file in a GIS type software, the FIPS code and formatted FIPS code fields allows you to join it to a boundary file that's within your setup. But the last column here is the value for each zip code. So this is, again, every zip code in California, and then the median household income for each zip code itself. And then same thing with points. Sure. So within the tool, there is a handful of shortcuts, and I completely apologize. It can be mouse free. It is, I have to get back to you, but I know that there is a keyboard only interface to PolicyMap, allowing you to tab through all the features, all the fields that you see here, including exporting, downloading, and such as well. I apologize, I don't have the shortcut to it in front of me, but I know that we did create those steps for that use. As for you visually impaired, I'm not sure. I do not think that we have different colors available within the tool. I know one of the reasons that we chose purple is that it is a very distinct color in the spectrums for usage for color maps and such. But I will get back to you on about the shortcut. That way you'll have that information at the very least. All right. We are getting to that very last moment. So let me just talk about a couple of last things, which is also the share feature. If you ever wanted to share this map itself outside of PolicyMap and outside of the university site license, the share link in the very top up here will give you some options. The first is a link itself. If you wanted to share this link internally, so just understand, as it says here, whoever you share this link with must be within the network of CalState Northridge. You can email that link to somebody else. This, though, the embed feature and the social feature is unique in that it allows you to share it more publicly. So it allows you to share this function outside of just the university usage. The embed actually allows you to put this map, interactive map, onto a website, allowing a user to get into that website, pan around a given area, click onto the map. If you've seen any of our blogs, I'll send those along, and you'll see all the maps that are in there are using the embed feature. And of course, the social feature actually allows you to post the map that you create, as long as the data is public, into any of the social media sites that are available. And I really do apologize for talking so much that I didn't get a chance to cover some of these other features, but I do have some good tutorials that'll go through them, and they are pretty simple. I think the one big goal about learning the maps page is that it's a good summary of how to learn the rest of PolicyMap itself, because everything else is as simple as it is learning the map side of the tool. All right, unless, of course, you want me to try to cram through some of the features on here, I'm happy to as well, or if we have more time. Correct. So maps of custom regions are not publicly shareable, but they are, once you save them and as a PDF or a PNG, or even share them within the university tools, that's shareable, but you can't post a map with a custom region as an embed map or on social media, mainly because the boundary itself is a custom boundary within the PolicyMap side of it, unfortunately. But if you save the map as a printout, then you can definitely share that map. It's just not interactive, that's all. All right, any other questions or parts you want me to talk about in a little more detail? Okay. So, I mean, I hope that gives you some ideas of, at the very least, the map side. I do apologize. We didn't get into some of the other features, but what we are actually doing is making some more summary functions for the other features. So the links that I do send do have more shortened tutorials that talk about tables, reports, and 3-layer maps, and even the data loader. So you're welcome to take a quick view of those as well. And if there's another chance to do this again, we'll go into some more details of PolicyMap. And then we also host public webinars throughout the week that cover either the basics that we talked about today, but also the more complex features that are on PolicyMap as well. So I'll send that calendar link along